Hey everyone, it's Wes Spence. Welcome back to Scar Tissue, a podcast by Cavu International, where we dig into the stories behind the scars. We're here to explore the human condition, resilience, mindset, personal growth, and the stories that, yes, could possibly leave a mark. Today, we are honored to have as our guest former professional race car driver, reality TV star, and now real estate professional, Arie Luyendyk. Hey Arie, how you doing?
Good.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'll tell you, when we were having the episode with Lauren, I wanted to convey the same thing to you. Really, I appreciate y'all letting me hang out with you yesterday. Not just because of the boat ride, but with your kids. My kids are older, and you saw the pictures of them, and having the chaos that comes with little kids running around. There's just, enjoy the time. That's all I was going to say to you, because it goes away way too fast.
I know, everyone says that. I know we're in a good spot right now. I love that, 3 to 5 year old age is so fun. They're just so curious about everything.
Everything's new.
I know, it's so cool. It's super cool. And that's why we're having another one. I felt like we were done, and then I was like, oh, it's just too fun. Now the baby stage is hard, and now we're through that, and now this is the good stuff. So
now it's the discovery part. Now they're seeing what life is like. You wish, as an aside before we get into the questions, I would like and hope that everybody tries to keep that inner 5-year-old as close to the surface as possible, because it's everything is great, everything is new, and that's a great way to look at life, I think.
I love her questions, and she makes me think about things too, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. She just has a really curious mind, and it's really cool to see through the lens of a 5-year-old. Some of the questions we get are pretty awesome. It's pretty fun.
With that theme, I know you all have. We'll talk about it. Your fan base. A lot of people on this audience may not be part of that fan base. So if you do me a favor and just kind of give me give them your background of where you grew up, where you're born, where you spent the most time, and what kind of impacts that may have had on you moving forward in life, where you grew, places where you grew up.
Yeah, so my story is kind of a different one. I was born in Holland. My family immigrated here when I was 3 years old, because my dad was a professional race car driver. He drove in the Indy 500. He won the Indy 500 twice. And then my life kind of took a turn. I always wanted to be a professional race car driver. Did that. The recession had other plans in 2008. Had to kind of pivot. Got into real estate, and then also went on reality television. Right. So I've kind of lived, a couple different, I feel like, lifetimes in this already short lifetime I've had. I'm 43 now, but I feel like I've had a lot of experiences in different industries. So moved to the Wisconsin initially, and then my dad was testing a lot and practicing in Arizona, because that's kind of where a lot of the off-season testing happened for IndyCar. Gotcha. Fell in love with Arizona. So as soon as my dad won the Indy 500 in 1990, we all moved to Phoenix.
Gotcha.
And so I've lived there ever since. A real short stint in Los Angeles, but then back to Scottsdale, where Lauren and I now live.
Okay. Thinking about growing up in Arizona, what were you? Because you spent most of the time there, right? When did you move? What age did you move there?
10.
10.
Yeah,
okay.
So I've lived there for a long time.
Gotcha. So, do you remember Wisconsin at all?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And we've been back. I've been back a lot to race there.
Okay. Which part of Wisconsin? I'm sorry. Which part of Wisconsin?
So I was in Milwaukee.
Okay.
Brookfield was like a little neighborhood outside of Milwaukee, and so we lived there. I definitely remember my childhood there. I loved it. I hated when we moved as a kid. I was like, I don't want to move. But then we moved to Phoenix. I was like, actually, the weather's pretty nice here. I can get used to this. And we love raising our family in Scottsdale. It's an awesome spot. In the summers we do escape a little bit because it gets way too hot.
Just a bit, yeah.
And from my upbringing, I was always traveling with my parents. So my dad raced, and so I was always kind of with them as the oldest kid. They always kind of brought me along. So when I was younger, we never really stuck around in Phoenix during the summer. It was race season.
Sure.
So we were on the road. And that kind of, I feel like, helped form who I am, because I feel like I matured, because I was always hanging around adults when I was younger. And I was always focused on, I want to be a race car driver, even from a young age.
Sure.
So Phoenix is home, but we love it there. And we also have a second home in Maui, which is pretty cool. So we get to escape and go there, which the kids love. And the kids are so funny at school. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, we have a house in Hawaii." I'm like, "Okay, People, they don't know any different, obviously, but it's so cute to hear them talk about that. But we actually love that for their upbringing because it's, there's so many things that you can do there that involve nature and being outdoors, and that's just the best for kids.
Exactly. So getting back to you're growing up in Wisconsin, either Wisconsin and Arizona. We'll talk about your dad and the racing impact on you here in a second. But what about just the cultures of either state? How do they impact you? And did they impact you moving forward? And do you still have some of those values you learned as a kid in Wisconsin and Arizona to this day?
I don't feel like those two places really impacted me too much just because we traveled so much.
Gotcha.
So I feel like it was always kind of home, but in the summers it would either be racing and traveling, so I'd get to see all parts of the country, and I feel like that really made my opinion or my upbringing very diverse. And then also we used to go back to Holland a lot, so all my extended family is in Europe, so we would either be in Phoenix for a little short of time when I had school, or we'd be in Europe, or we'd be racing. So I feel like for me, I really got to see a lot as a young adult, and also growing up, that it kind of helped me understand the world quicker than maybe like some of my fellow students that I was going to school with. I always felt like I was kind of like a little bit a step ahead just because I had been exposed to so much, which I think is what we try to do with our kids too. I think it's important for them to see Virginia and go travel. Like we were in DC, visiting all the monuments last week, and where
you couldn't buy a kite.
Yeah, where we couldn't buy a kite. And so we're always like thinking like, oh, what can we expose them to? And I think it's important I think travel can really shape a young person.
100%. Well, as a military family, we spent 5 years overseas, and I wouldn't have changed that for the world. It just exposed them to utterly 180 out cultures that you're just never going to see unless you go there. And I think that's invaluable. So yeah, spot on in my opinion. So yeah, you talked about your dad already. 2 Indy 500 championships obviously had an impact on your life. What can you describe that impact? I mean, did you get into racing as that influence, or is this something that you just took a step back and you just really liked the lifestyle? I mean, or is it a little bit of both? Kind of go into that a little bit.
I don't know if it was about the lifestyle. It was just like, I remember like being on the outside of the track and just seeing the Indy car drive by at like, 230 miles an hour and being like, damn, that's cool.
Right.
Like, wow. And I was like, that would be so cool. Yeah. Like I wonder what that feels like, as a kid. And so I don't think it was something that I really focused in on because it just sort of was normal to me because I was always at the track until I was in my teenage years when my buddies were like, whoa, your dad races? That's so cool. And I was like, oh yeah, that's not normal for everyone, obviously. So this is something unique. Yep. And then when I started driving, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So for me, I was like, school is like not, it should have been probably more of a priority, but luckily for me, it worked out. Right. Became an IndyCar driver, only ran in one Indy 500, unfortunately. Had a long career leading up to that. And then as soon as I sort of made it to IndyCar, 2008 happened and the recession happened and it kind of dried up all the sponsorship and funding.
Sure.
So then I was like, man, now what do I do? I've created this whole identity. Like this is like who I am. Like now what kind of thing. So I had to rebuild and think about what else I wanted to do with my life. And that was kind of a hard period. And then I sort of stumbled on being on television. Nothing I really wanted to pursue, but it kind of happened just because of the connections I had. And so I went on The Bachelorette. That kind of changed the trajectory of my life. And then I found real estate as a really good outlet.
Yep. We'll get to that in a minute. So we'll do a deep dive on that.
Yeah. So then,
there's things that make everybody who they are, right? And so I kind of want to kind of anchor on the racing part a little bit. Right? So I was looking through, all what your experience as described on Wikipedia, which is everything's true on Wikipedia, right? But what really stood out to me was the sheer variance of what you did. You started, you said the Indy type cars. What do they call that? The I forget.
Indy Lights.
Indy Lights.
Yeah, like it's kind of like the AAA to like major leagues sort of thing.
And and then you went into the racing truck scene. Those are your foundations of what made you. Correct? You said this is your identity. So what about that made it your identity? What was some of the key aspects of being a successful race car driver?
I think, first and foremost, I think you just have to be mentally very strong. You're always compared to either your teammate.
Yeah.
So essentially how racing works, from the lower end there, you really don't have this too much. But once you get to a point to where you're in a competitive team, you might not have the fastest car, but you're always going to be compared to your teammates. And so you'll have to always beat that person first. And then so you have to accomplish that. So there's some pressure there. And then after that, you'll have to, for my case, I had to live up to my dad's name, which is added pressure because he was a legend.
Yep.
And then when you get to the point where you're advancing, you have to win championships, you have to win races.
Yep.
And as soon as you stop winning, really your career is over. Yeah. So there's an immense pressure to win. And along with that, so you have this feeling like, okay, I got to make it happen. So how can I win? So then it's all about, eating the right foods, working out, studying. In racing, a lot of people think, oh, just get in the car and you just drive fast. Well, it's a lot of understanding what makes that car fast. So a lot of these race car drivers are essentially engineers. A lot of them go to school for engineering, and they have to look at data and they have to understand, okay, if I do this, then the car is going to do this, and how can I make that car faster? Because all the race cars, whether it's you're racing in sports cars or Indy cars or off-road trucks, there's always some sort of little advantage you can gain over your competition by having a faster car.
Right.
So all these drivers are trying to figure out, like, how can I make my car just a little bit faster within the rules? So that immense pressure and that ability to adapt and be quick, natural talent. And then, there was guys that were always quicker than me throughout my career, but for some reason they didn't advance because they couldn't adapt to maybe a different car or make or maybe beat their teammate or something like that.
Right.
And then they just kind of fell off and did other things. How marketable you are, how good at raising sponsorship. That's a whole nother side of racing.
Wow. Yeah.
So there's just a lot that goes into it. And I remember thinking, made it to the Indy 500. The year previously, I didn't make it in the race. So the fastest 33 make it, and I got bumped out.
I read that.
Yeah, which is really painful.
Yeah.
So, that really hurt, and then you have to think, okay, how do I pick myself up? The next year, qualified for the race on a really shoestring budget, we built our own team. It was hard to make it in the race, but we made it in the race. And I remember kind of every point forward from that moment, that pressure was so intense that I remember going on TV and these guys are all freaking out about being on TV and meeting the girl. And I'm like, this is like nothing compared to what I just did a few years ago. Like standing there, trying to make it into the Indy 500 was like the most intense pressure I've ever felt. So I think once you do really, really hard things like that, then you kind of have a benchmark. Mm-hmm. It's like, everyone, I think, who has done something incredibly hard can kind of attest to the fact that once they've done that really hard thing, the next thing that's difficult might not seem that hard. It's just like, it's all about perspective. So for me, that was definitely a moment in my life that defined who I was.
Awesome.
Kind of like taking that day, accomplishing that mission that I had. And then after that, things just didn't seem that hard to me,
Describe the internal team dynamics. What would you guys do to make you successful? If you can.
Yeah, if I could rewind time, I would probably do things differently. The 2005, what happened was there was an opportunity to get into the race. Mm-hmm. I kind of jumped into the seat at the last moment. So basically, the Indy 500, you have weeks of practice.
Sure.
And then there's 33 drivers make the field. And there was kind of a couple open spots. And they thought, okay, well, I could probably get in a car and qualify in the last day and make the show. Well, that didn't happen because a lot of people sort of had that same idea. So then it got really competitive at the end there.
Yeah.
But that was kind of hard. So we jumped in the car at the last minute. I didn't make the field. Then the next year we thought, okay, we want to make the field. How do we do it? So we leased a car from one of the teams that was successful. But then there was a rule change and that car became not so competitive. So there was two cars in that race. There was a Panos, which is the one I drove, and then a Dallara. And there was only like 3 or 4 or 5, maybe 5 Panos that made the race that year, and they were all in the back. So I had kind of an uncompetitive car, but we were able to kind of get the speed out of it and make the show. But that was kind of tense because I'd just gone through the previous year not making it. And then, you know, my dad's a 2-time champion. He finished 7th in his first race, was always successful at that track. And for me, for me growing up racing, for some reason, Indy was never like a track that I just like latched onto and I got right away. Yeah. Like, I don't know if like you can compare this to other sports, but
shooting sports. I mean, that's for me. There's certain weapons that you are built, you just naturally gravitate. You pick it up and it feels great and you shoot it great. The other ones, it's like picking up a brick. And it just doesn't fit you right. There's just something about it. It's really hard to describe.
Yeah, like I love Indy. I think the track is awesome. But even in Indy Lights, I finished 2nd there, I finished 3rd there. Like I was always successful there. But for me, for some reason, I didn't get the feeling I had at some tracks where I hit the track and I'm like, dang, I love this track. Like I'm good at this one, you know. And then you just all of a sudden you're just like quick there. And my dad had that with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and for me it was a little harder. So when I got into the IndyCar, which you know, looking back, I probably should have gotten more testing and more practice before I entered that arena. But in 2006, made the field, felt good to make it, you know, and then the recession hit and kind of like turned my career in a different direction. But at least I had accomplished that goal of making that race. And felt good.
So, did your dad ever give you any advice going out there, or he just kind of?
Of course. Yeah, my dad had a lot. My dad had good advice for me, but I think when you're young in your early 20s, you don't really listen to your dad.
But do you have some that you've probably said, I probably should listen to him on that?
No, I definitely, as soon as I got into the Indy car, for some reason the Indy Lights car, which has a top speed of about 200, I think I might still have the record in the Indy Lights car around Indianapolis, which is like 196. There's a huge difference between like 196 miles an hour and like 220, 230. It's like that 20 mile an hour gain is huge. Like it's massive.
It's reaction times and everything.
It's just, it comes out so much quicker. I remember my first laps in the Indy car and struggling a little bit and sliding around and thinking like, dang, the old man is impressive. You know, it's like I always kind of was like cocky, a little bit more arrogant, but that really humbled me. And then I realized he's pretty incredible. But it's still hard to take advice from your dad. I remember Rick Mears gave me some advice that really helped.
What was it?
I think he was just like, you know, just take it one step at a time. I think Rick Mears was kind of helping me with, you know, like my dad would always be like, just turn in later, you know, delay your turn in later. That was like the thing that you do when you're uncomfortable in the Indy cars, you turn in early, which gives you all sorts of issues on the back end of the corner.
Gotcha.
It like tightens up the mid corner. It makes the car, you know, want to step out on you. But it's hard to tell your brain to do something. you know what you need to do, but doing it is another thing. And I can't remember what Rick said. He probably said the exact same thing. He just worded it differently. You know what I mean? But I think it's coming from somebody else. And my dad, you know, although he's a great coach, but I think it was harder for him to coach me.
I'm sure. Yeah, you know? He's your kid, so I'm sure he probably backed off a little bit, I would imagine, because you don't want to show favoritism or whatever. You know, all that. You know, just daddy's boy. You don't want to be that kind of.
I think his dad was really hard on him growing up, and my grandpa was kind of the reason why I got into racing. He's the first one to stick me in a car. I don't think my dad really wanted me to become an IndyCar driver, but my grandfather, he really was passionate, but also like he was sort of that dad who was going to be hard on you, you know? And my dad was not that way. He was very like, okay, like kind of hands off, to be honest. Which he didn't apply much pressure, which was kind of nice. But I think he didn't want to be like his dad. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Even though, like, my dad's successful, and, you know, my grandfather was probably a huge part of that. I think he was like, somewhere in the middle ground's probably better. And that's where he was.
Thinking about your dad and the relationship you had with him while you were driving, what was like the best thing he did for you?
I think my dad was really good at. My dad was really good at just giving me, I would say, just support in the way that he knew what I was going through more than anyone else.
Yeah.
So it really did bond us because we were doing, he had gone through all the things I was going through,
Sure.
and dealing with the pressures of trying to be successful in that sport, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
And I think it was really cool because, we'll always have that, that camaraderie, and
Yeah.
it's just unique, and I think there's a lot of racing families, and I think that's probably the reason why, because it's such a unique sport, but it also takes a really the approach to becoming successful in racing. I think that can be something learned from your father.
Sure.
I think that's why you have the Unzers and you have the Andrettis.
Right.
And also you need a lot of support in the beginning of your career to even make it.
Yeah.
Because it is such a hard sport to kind of crack into. If you think about IndyCar drivers, there's only, 33 of them,
Yeah.
and like Formula One, there's only like 20 Formula One drivers. So
Yeah.
that's the pinnacle. And it's just really hard because so many people start out and just don't make it there. It's hard to have a career in racing. But yeah, so we'll always have that bond, and
You
that's
bet.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
What was your biggest challenge in racing?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in racing was just being adaptable.
Okay.
Like you said, I've raced Indy cars, I've raced sports cars, I've
Yep.
raced trucks, I jump through the air, I've raced sprint cars.
Yep.
So I've raced so many different things, and I think that is the biggest thing, is just to wrap your head around a type of vehicle and to adapt,
Okay.
and then just deal with the pressure, of trying to make it a career for sure.
Right. And then, so what was your favorite part overall?
I think looking back, I think the favorite part was just the relationships I built, the places I got to see.
Yeah.
And obviously the feeling that you have in the car when everything is just perfect. I think that's kind of a feeling that you only know, if
Yep.
you're a driver, just being in sync with that vehicle to where it's almost like you're one unit. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. So a little bit of shift in thought right now. I was telling Lauren, my wife was like, "Hey, you got to watch the episodes before you go talk to these people." Oh, okay, so I'm watching the episodes, and what really struck me, when you had talked to Dave about going over and visiting the troops in Iraq, and so I just wanted to thank you for doing that, because
of course.
I spent 2 years of my life in Afghanistan. So when people came over to show appreciation, it meant something, and so I just wanted to say thank you for that. But having said that, what was it like when you first met Dave, and what was it like for you mentally marrying into a military family? I mean, what was some of the preconceptions you had, and how many of those preconceptions turned out to be, totally illegitimate, or some that were legitimate? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, The Bachelor is a pressure cooker, and meeting the family is like probably the hardest day, because you're just like, oh my gosh, you really want it to go well.
Yeah.
And military family, thinking about Dave, everyone was saying how he's quiet, and I'm like, oh gosh, how's this gonna go? But Dave was actually really receptive and like really welcoming. I think Pamela was a little harder on me, which was surprising.
Oh, Mama Bear, she's going to be tough. That's no matter what you do.
I was worried about Dave, but no, I think the cool part is Dave and I have, although don't have any military background, don't have a lot of friends in the military, I feel like flying a fighter jet and racing an Indy car, although they're very different, I think it's kind of cool because they're both very challenging, and they all have to deal with speed. And I feel like that kind of was something that we could land on and chat about, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And then, traveling to Iraq was like an opportunity that I got that was really cool.
What was the big takeaway for you when you went there?
It was just how the biggest thing that I took away was that these young men are just out there for like some of the 15 months at a time, or maybe more.
Yeah.
And just the fact that they can have a conversation outside of their troop and just hang out was just like so impactful for them, which is so fun to see, and to be able to just chat about things at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I felt like they really needed that in that moment. For me, it was just the vast operation of what was going on there was interesting to me. The bases, how large they were, some of them, obviously the Army babies or the fobs that were like very small and like,
well, they say, logistics is what wins wars.
Yeah,
and,
it was.
We're pretty good at it at that point. Especially.
It was incredible. It was an experience. It was over Christmas time in 2008, I believe, and it was just one of those things where that kind of stuck with me, just because it's like you don't realize, like, you're here at home, everything's great. It's really easy to not really think about what's happening. Yeah. But then when you're there and you see everything, you're like, wow, this is incredible. And then it's obviously tough and it's nerve-wracking. And at that time, the war was sort of wrapping up there. Things were moving to Afghanistan, so it wasn't as volatile, So for me, I felt pretty safe. Right. But it was just kind of one of those things where you're like, wow, this is like, I can't believe that this is happening over here. You know what I mean?
Yep. The biggest challenge, I think, at least from my own sense and from a lot of my friends too, is that one minute you're in a fairly dangerous spot, and then within 24 hours the flight get you back home. All of a sudden you're sitting in coastal California surfing with your friends.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most challenging mental shifts you have to make, and we've at least from Naval Special Warfare perspective, we do better at it, but we still can do a lot better than we do. I don't think people give it as much credence or as much noteworthiness as it really needs to be. Just that mental shift from going from that situation to back home to where it doesn't seem real. Home doesn't seem real, And so again, that's why I think when people like you go over there and visit and take people back to the normalcy of what they want to be, it's a big thing and a big gift, because they need that mental break.
Yeah, I can see that.
Given your dad and what you've learned through racing, what you learned in your travels, you develop a set of values. And I'm curious, with your kids right now, you got one on the way, you got number 4 on the way. What are some of the values you think you've developed over the years, and what values do you want to see your family have moving forward that you can impart upon them?
That's a tough one. I think that for us, I don't think there's a set value. I just think it's just, we love to go to church on Sunday. Yeah. I think that's important for our kids. Okay. They're being raised in a Christian community, which is important. They have really good friends. I think it's important to travel, see the world, see a different culture. Yeah. I think that helps. Not everything should be like, okay, Scottsdale is like their bubble and this is all they should know. I think traveling and seeing the world is important, so they can understand that there's different cultures and people, aren't as well off as us. And I think it's good to know and see all that. And I think right now it's such an early time for them, but just obviously being close to family. Yeah. I think being in an environment, a loving environment, and one where they can grow and be curious and understand the world, and one step at a time, obviously, because they're so young. Yeah. But I think those are the important things right now. Okay. And then when they get older, there obviously will be more. You know what I mean? But I think
the challenges that's going. This is the fun part.
This is the fun part right now. I think this is the part where we don't have to think too hard on it. Just make sure they're in a just make sure they're in a good environment. Make sure they see. They see it all and take in as much as they can. I think that's the most important part right now.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to a little bit of business focus. And you had talked about in 2008 recession hit you, your whole identity goes away. Mm-hmm. And I've had a couple people on the show that were champions, like at a young age in surfing, for example, and then had to make the switch. One of them he did the same thing as you. He went from being kind of top of his game, and then he went into real estate, and then he's building his real estate business in Florida. Yeah. So what was that like? I mean, and because it really convey the sense of what you were. And how did you reinvent yourself moving forward into real estate? What got you into real estate?
Yeah. So real estate, one of my dad's good friends was in real estate. And obviously 2004 to 2008, he was like crushing it. In 2004 to 2006, I guess. Yep. And so I was like, man, he's really successful. And my dad was buying and selling a lot. And I was buying and selling a lot because I was doing IndyCar at that point. So, things were good. And then 2008 happened, and I was like, oh man, real estate would be a good job, but it's a pretty tough one right now. So I got my license in 2004. So I was racing along with doing real estate.
What actually interested you in going into real estate?
I think it was just the fact that so in racing, you're always selling sponsorship. That's kind of your thing. It's like, okay, I want to go race, but I have to raise, X amount of $1 million. It's pretty hard to do. And then you're selling a sticker, this big that's going by at 200 miles an hour. It's not exactly the easiest thing to sell.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay. So then I started getting into real estate because my dad's friend was so successful. His name was Doug. And he'd helped out with my racing, and we'd known him for a long time. He actually was one of the guys that helped me early in my career. So he would sponsor me. I had Remax on my car in the beginning.
Gotcha. Yep.
So in the beginning of racing, you kind of lean on a lot of your dad's contacts and friends because, you needed that funding to get going. So Doug DeCosta is his name, and he's a good friend still, and he was successful in real estate. So I joined with him and learned from him. And what I kind of found is racing, along with a lot of professional sports, probably is a lot of sales. Like you're selling yourself.
Yeah. I thought of it that way. Yeah, you're right.
You're selling yourself. You're selling like your talent. You have you're advocating for yourself. You're trying to find the sponsorship to go racing. So now it's like, okay, now I'm selling a home. This is something that people actually need and want. Like before, I'm selling something. You know what I mean? I'm selling it's harder to sell racing sponsorship than it is to sell a house. So I was like, oh, I can apply what I learned by selling sponsorships to selling homes, and that transition was actually pretty seamless for me. So I felt like, okay, this is something I could be good in. If the racing doesn't ever pan out, this is something I could transition into. And I think that's why you see a lot of professional, maybe surfers or professional athletes switch to real estate because they probably were investing in real estate when they were successful in their job.
Yep.
And so they know a little bit about it. And now they're like, okay, well, what's next? They, punch a clock, work for myself. And I thought, okay, let's get into real estate. And that's kind of how that started.
Okay. What do you focus on? You do a residential business or space?
Yeah. So I started actually. Yeah. So my real estate story is pretty interesting, I guess. I started flipping paper. So what I would do is I kind of found a loophole in Arizona. You have a 10-day inspection period. So what I would do is I would find really great deals through MLS or knocking on doors or talking to neighbors. And if I found a house that was going up for sale, I would write the contract in my name and then use a friend's hard money loan. So I'd write it as cash.
Yep.
And then what I would do is I'd have the inspection window to turn around and assign the contract to somebody else. So either a friend of my dad's, because he has some successful friends, or some, investor clients. And then in that window, I would wholesale the property, and I would get the buyer broker commission. And then I'd end up selling it or they'd end up buying the house and then I'd sell it for them at zero commission because all I really wanted was to turn the property and get the buyer broker commission. And then I would then they would make money on the sale because, we bought it at a good price, and then they would entrust me to do that again. So then I just kind of rinsed and repeated on that until they entrusted me to sell their personal homes, which were luxury. And then I got into the luxury space.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's how I pivoted. So I kind of made business out of, there was no business really, but I kind of made it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It sounded like he just pivoted right away. There was no real pause in the action from being, okay, race driver today. Now I'm just like, bam, now I'm going to real estate. Yeah,
it was basically, it probably took me 6 months to 8 months to really get that first sale. And then it just kind of built from there.
Okay.
And then, it was still hard to do because obviously the real estate market was.
Oh yeah, right. I remember that. I mean, that was
the tubes.
Challenging.
Very challenging. And then, and then.
It was good for me though, because I bought a house right at the.
Yeah, there you go. It's good for a lot of people. It ended up being really good for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was sort of what I was doing. I was doing a lot of driver coaching. I was still trying to stay in the racing game, but it was kind of harder and harder.
Yep.
So then pretty much. I still race now, but not at a competitive level.
What do you drive right now?
Right now, I drive a sprint car, and I also drive some of the truck stuff.
Okay.
But basically, 2008 was sort of the end of my professional career in racing. Right. To the point where I still did a lot of racing, but I wasn't making a huge living. I was making that on real estate.
Gotcha. So what are you doing besides real estate right now? What are some of the other opportunities you've been taking advantage of?
So right now, a lot of social media marketing,
Okay.
What Lauren does. We do that together. Content creation, YouTube. Ever since being on The Bachelor, we've kind of focused in on that. And that's been a really successful career in that as well. It's sort of an industry that is newer, but there's a lot of growth. A lot of major brands have shifted towards social media marketing,
right?
Because of just the amount of eyes. And traditional marketing is a little bit tougher, and I think there's just more opportunity there.
Okay.
So the whole influencer marketing space is really interesting.
You have the creative part of it, and you have the practical side of running a business. Mm-hmm. So how do you balance those? Who does what, or does everybody kind of pull all together in both sides of that?
Between Lauren and myself?
Or just just from the creative aspect to the practical business nuts and bolts, ones and zeros running of a business.
I wouldn't say there's too much. For the social media stuff, we have a management team that handles the bookings. So they basically take care of everything. And then we just create the content.
Okay.
So we're not actively pursuing partnerships on our own.
Gotcha.
We have a management team that handles that, and they do an excellent job. And then we just create the content. And if it aligns within our family and what we're doing,
what's like some of the main themes you try to focus on for your content?
I think for us, we just try to do just like wholesome family centric stuff. So
my wife loved it, by the way. So she.
So it's just our daily lives, really. It's just kind of following along what we do. We're very comfortable grabbing a phone and talking about what we're doing for the day, which a lot of people are uncomfortable with. But after years of doing it, it's just so natural to sort of document what you're kind of going through, whether it's a good time or a hard time. And that's just something that we've grown accustomed to. And
I'm assuming your race car driver experience and, like you said, dealing with the press at that point really helped you personally. Go through a lot of that.
I think in the beginning, for sure, when I was on Bachelorette, when I first started doing reality television, I was pretty comfortable doing interviews. But for the social media stuff, it's a little different because just holding a phone and having now it's so natural. But 5-10 years ago, it'd be really awkward if someone was walking around talking to themselves on the phone, filming themselves.
Right.
But now it's just second nature.
Everybody's doing it.
Everyone's doing it. Real estate, I would say, and then the influencer marketing. And then we do investing too. Now we have a couple commercial buildings. So Lauren and I have dove into that. We've had failed businesses too.
We'll do that in a minute.
We've. I think a lot of being successful is trying different things and seeing kind of what sticks and what becomes successful. Sometimes you have an idea what you're going to be successful at, and then all of a sudden life goes no, actually this is probably where you belong.
Yes.
And it's just your life kind of goes through these peaks and valleys, and I would never imagine myself in a million years doing influencer marketing 10, 15 years ago. I'd be no, I'm good. But Lauren got into it, and I was yeah, she's doing really well. Actually, she's doing really well. I have to sell a lot of houses to be, you know what I mean? I'm trying to think about the amount of effort I put into selling houses, and I was she's doing really well, so let me try this as well. So, life's crazy what it can throw at you, for sure.
You brought it up. I was thinking I was going to bring it right now. So how did, speaking of crazy things, how did you get into the reality TV action, Bachelorette, then The Bachelor? How did that come about?
So it is kind of a by chance kind of thing. I dated someone in my early 20s, and then I went through a long relationship, got out of that relationship, and I went with my buddies. My buddies are okay, you got to get over this relationship. We're going to go to LA. We're going to go to the Playboy Mansion. I was all right, we're doing it. So go to LA, having the time of my life. On the way there, we stop at a coffee shop, and I run into my ex-girlfriend of I only dated her for a short amount of time, but she's she used to be in local news in Indiana. And so I was like, oh, wow, so you live in LA now? She's like, yeah, I'm actually one of the producers on The Bachelor. And I was like, well, that's kind of crazy. I'm like, well, I'm single now. I'm here with my buddies, and we're celebrating the fact that I'm single. And she's like, well, she's like, let me get your number. And I'm like, okay. She's like, because I really feel like the girl that we have chosen for The Bachelorette might be a good fit for you. And she's like, actually, she'd be a perfect fit for you. And I was like, okay. So I kind of didn't play it any mind, and I went back home, and then she called, and she's like, well, we're filming in a few days. She's like, we're actually filming next week. If you want to do it, like, the opportunity is yours. And I was like, okay, cool. So I just kind of went without watching the show, not knowing the show at all. I show up there, and I'm like, I'm a skinny guy, I'm like 30 years old. I'm a little older than the guys there. And everyone's like ripped, and they're all hanging out at the pool, barbecuing. And I'm like, I don't know if this is my core group. This is kind of like a different. I'm like drinking cappuccinos, eating Nutella in the kitchen, not like watching what I'm eating. These guys have been preparing. They've been eating no carbs. They've been working out like crazy. They've been like practicing what they're gonna say to her. They've studied her. They know her interests. They know everything about her, right?
Yeah, that's kind of scary, actually. Yeah, but yeah.
Right. I mean, I was like, and I'm like, wow, I'm not prepared at all. So then, I meet her, and then the conversation flowed really well. And, I wasn't really nervous about being on camera, which a lot of guys were nervous about. They were all very nervous to meet her. And I feel like I just was like, I got thrown into it, and I was really relaxed, and I had the time of my life. And, didn't make it.
Heck, you were single.
Yeah, I was having a great time. I didn't have my phone on me. It was just kind of like I didn't have to work. I was like, oh, this is really nice, actually. Yeah. And made it through that whole experience. Didn't get engaged, made it to the end. I was the runner-up. Yeah. And I was like, well, that was a cool experience. Went home, and really didn't want to pursue being on TV. I was just kind of like, that was a fun experience, but I don't want to make a career out of this, which a lot of people will shift and be like, okay, now I'm a reality TV star, and they'll try to go and do other shows. And I think my approach was more like, that was a fun experience, and I guess we'll leave it at that. So then I dove into real estate like head first, and sort of went back home and didn't pay much attention to it. And then, eventually they called for me to be the Bachelor, but it wasn't until like 6 years later.
Wow. Okay.
Which is kind of insane.
Yeah.
And then that's sort of the trajectory, I guess, of my reality television career. And now I've done a couple things since, but for me, it's nothing that I've always like enjoyed the experience. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to become like a reality television, like regular. Yeah. Because there's only so many shows that you can kind of go and do.
Sure.
But I've been fortunate enough to do The Bachelor, Traders, House Hunters International, kind of some spin-off shows. It's been fun.
This is like my favorite part of the show, but the movie Forrest Gump, right? Mm-hmm. The character backs his way and everything. I always say my whole life is one big Forrest Gump moment. What's probably can guess it already, but what's your biggest Forrest Gump moment where it surprised you pleasantly and you actually took advantage of it and you made it best? I'm assuming it's The Bachelor.
The Bachelor. Yeah. I mean, that is such a funny analogy because I feel like that is kind of my life. You know how it just kind of falls into things like, then I was a professional ping pong player. And then you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, then I played football. And then, it's like that is kind of funny because my life has had a lot of that. Lauren and I talk about that a lot. I think the fact that you can do so many different things and fall into so many different things. Some people could call it luck. Other people could call it just being in the right place at the right time.
Receptive.
Yeah. Or is it the fact that you put yourself in a position to be lucky? Yeah. I think is more the thing. Yeah. I think that's something that I've always felt like, yes, I've had all these opportunities, but I've also made those count. Yeah. Like every single show that I've been on, I've made it to the end of that show. So I've obviously done something right. You know what I mean?
Correct. Yeah.
Or every racing opportunity, I've somehow managed to win or get there or be there in the end. I think a lot of that comes with self-confidence. Mm-hmm. I think it comes with, a lot of another factor would just be obviously, self-confidence, believing in yourself, mm-hmm. and knowing that you can do anything, and you can be
Yeah.
successful. I think it's just a lot of self-belief.
Actually, so that's one aspect. The counterpoint to that be, what's your darkest moment? And at that moment, what do you think about you got you through that moment so that you can be better when you get out the other side?
Yeah, I think the darkest moment, would just be the realization that like racing is not going to be the thing that is my what I'm going to be known for. I think I wanted it so badly to be successful, to be an IndyCar winner, to drive in a million Indy 500s, and reach the potential my dad did. And I think that realization that that's not going to happen for me, and then trying to redefine myself was probably one of the hardest ones. I'd say another one was, I would say that one. I do also remember, kind of along those lines, I remember doing a lot of these like driver instruction gigs, and I was like, oh man, this is like the rest of my life. I'm going to be training other people how to be fast.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine she just called me. She's like, oh yeah, I just closed my first deal, and it was like a $50,000 real estate check, and I was like, maybe that's what I need to do. That was also kind of a dark time. I remember being in this hotel doing driver training. And then obviously the Bachelor, the pressure cooker of the Bachelor was very hard.
Yeah.
The public scrutiny of changing my mind and going back to Lauren.
Yeah.
But just knowing that you got to know what's best for you is also a lesson out of that. That was a really hard time. I think those 3 moments of my life were hard, but also led to the most amazing things too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that was pretty, and I think that's true in any time that you have a failure, you have to take something from it.
Yep.
Not so much a failure, but like a hard moment in your life, you have to take something from it, and it probably will lead to some of the most like amazing times in your life. And that's kind of what's happened in my life, is that I know that on the back end of a hard time is usually a really, really good time.
Yeah.
You just got to be patient and understand what's happening in the moment and why it's happening. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. So that is definitely the key.
Okay. Is there like a particular decision points in there that were key to the success that you had within any given endeavor?
I think for me, I feel like looking back, you always have to, I know it's such a cliche thing to say, but to really trust your gut. I knew looking back that Duo wasn't going to be a success. That's an app that we started.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I was like, like I felt, and I held on a little too long, and I couldn't.
What was it you thought? What was your gut telling you? I mean, what was just not right?
I think that my gut was saying like, this is kind of out of our realm of expertise. Like, I think maybe we bit off more than we could chew. I think we kind of dove in too hard on that one. And I think success-wise, like The Bachelor, knowing that decision was going to really just like fire everyone up and people were going to be very angry about it, but I was like, but knowing that, that shouldn't matter, and like your own happiness should be, and the decision was the right decision.
Yeah. And
I knew it was the right decision, but I think a lot of times you can let other people's opinions creep in, and that can affect the outcome. And I think that's important to know, that you really have to listen to your own heart and to your gut.
Yeah.
And if you feel like it's right, then it's right, or vice versa. If you feel like this is not the road or the path that you should be following, you should probably listen, because the longer you kind of hold that off, the more damage you could do. Yeah. So it's just more or less like really just trying to, what do you feel internally about this decision? Yeah. And the faster you can react to that, can define if you're successful or unsuccessful.
Yeah. So looking back at your 20-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Yeah, I think just to give yourself some grace, and I think most successful people put a lot of pressure on themselves. Yeah. I mean, that's like a no-brainer. Yeah. Everyone who's successful is going to put a massive amount of pressure on themselves. Yeah. I think I would tell my 20-year-old self, like, hey, right now this is like your everything, and this is like, you feel like this is like the most insane pressure and you feel like this is defining you, but like really it's not. It's like it's one chapter in the book.
Moment in time.
Yeah, it's just very, it's like, I think that would have helped disarm myself and maybe I would have been more successful because I wouldn't have been so held down on the pressure that I had put on myself. You know, I think that, like now, the success I've had in my later life, I think is because of the perspective I've taken. You know, I think I'm like, is it really that big of a deal? Will America hate me for this? Sure. I'm like, you know, but in the end of the day, I'm going to have a great life with the person I love. And like, that's all that matters, really. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or the Indy 500, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't qualify. This is like, my life is ruined. Like, no. You have better things ahead, you know? Yeah. Like, if I could have seen the future, I would have been like, oh, this is nothing.
Yeah. That's a great point. So, now, so we're talking a little bit about your soul right now, I think, and I always talk about what helps me kind of deal with those arrows that are hitting you every day, and it's all about surfing for me. You know, it washes me. You know, no matter how bad a day I have, come out of the water, I'm good. What do you do to cleanse your soul? What does Arie do?
I still take laps. You know, I have the sprint car, or I have like even a shifter cart at home. Like I'll just drive. We'll just obviously go to the track. Yeah. And it's pretty cool. Like if you've done a sport in your life, or an activity to where you're so ultra focused that you can't think of anything else other than that. You know, like surfing.
It's a living in the moment. Yeah. You can't think of anything else except that.
Right. And this is the same with racing. Like your mind can't wander. It's just completely focused at that. I think that's something. Or even like going in my garage and like building something. You know, just like simple things like that will take your mind away from the everyday stresses. So that's what I do.
Okay. Excellent. So what's next for you?
I think right now, like my future is my family. I feel like that's like the fun part about having kids. I feel like I'm an old dad. I'm 43 having another child, but I'm always thinking about like, okay, that baby is going to be.
They'll keep you young.
When they're 18, I'll be 61, you know? Yeah. So for me, it's just about focusing on that, you know, focusing on their future, you know, continuing this success in business to give them opportunities that I also had growing up, being in a successful family. I think that's kind of the focus for now. It's just like spending time with them and continuing to crush it in what we're doing.
There you go. All right. So last but not least, we talked last night about top 3 scars. What are your biggest lesson learned in life? Why? And we'll close it on that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Top 3 scars, I would say is see, I didn't even think about these last night. Okay. Top 3 scars, I think would be, you know, learn to deal with the pressure.
Yep.
And to know that, you know, no matter how much pressure you put on yourself, that it's only a moment in time.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, drawing from the Indy 500, drawing from the Bachelor experience. I guess another scar for me would be, you know, I guess learning to be adaptable. You know, I think that's a big one. Is like for me, is like I define myself in one way, but just know that your life can turn so many different ways that the plan that you're in right now might not be the plan for you, and be okay with that, because if things shift and you're doing something else, it might be something that you're even more passionate about. You know, like fatherhood's one of those things. Yeah. You know, like my life was defined in career and racing, and now that I'm a dad, it's like that's all I can think about. I guess another scar that's defined me is just.
It could be a good one too. It doesn't have to be a bad.
Yeah, issue, yeah. Right? I think for me, it's just, you know, for me, I guess the biggest one would be the fact that don't care too much about what people think. You know, I think that's been a big one for me. It's like creating your own path, no matter if it's controversial or not. If you feel like that is the right path for you, that's going to be what you should do. Like for me, for example, The Bachelor was a huge one. You know, obviously going back on a decision and knowing that what I needed in my life was Lauren.
Yeah.
I knew that was going to be met with a lot of controversy, but it was the best decision I made in my life. So I think, and that's because I don't really let other people get in my ear. You know, I know what you should know what's best for you, and don't let other people's opinions affect that.
Yeah, that's a good skill set to have, I think.
Yep.
So before we say adios, anything you want to let the audience know about? Any endeavors to go that you might want to be just put out there? Hey, take a look at this website or what have you.
Yeah, I would say if you want to check it out, like go to our YouTube channel. You know, we obviously share a lot about our family, and I think that's and it's grown to be a really cool community. You know, I think it's fun, and we just love sharing our lives. So if you guys want to check it out, it's YouTube, and our handle is Lauren and Arie.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, great. Well, Arie, it's been a pleasure. Great hanging out with you and Lauren yesterday, and I'm so happy you both came on the show. It's been a couple years in the making. So,
of course.
Awesome. And hope to have you guys back at some point soon.
We'd love that.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Take it easy. Appreciate it.
Alrighty.
Yeah, that was fun.
Cool.